Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn show with me, Andrew Eborn, and delighted to be joined today by Ben Habib, the chairman of the Great British Pack, who's standing for a proud, independent, sovereign, prosperous United Kingdom. All great stuff. He's a prominent figure in Britain's political landscape who played a pivotal role in the Brexit Party as an MEP and later served as co-deputy leader of Reform UK. A successful property developer turned politician, Ben was once a close ally of Nigel Farage, working together to champion Brexit and reshape the political right. But their relationship took a dramatic turn, leading to Ben's removal as co-deputy leader in 2024 and his eventual exit from Reform UK, after which he accused Farage of running the party like a fiefdom and silencing dissent. He's now an outspoken critic. Ben has warned that Farage is incapable of saving the UK and could do massive damage if in office. He claims he's not hesitated to share publicly. With us now to unpack his journey with Farage, the highs, the lows, and his unfiltered take on the man leading Reform UK. Delighted to welcome Ben Habib. Well, welcome back, Ben.
Good to be on. Good to see you, Andrew, and thank you for the sterling work you're doing.
Well, it's always encouraging. And you very kindly wrote me a nice little note after my interview with Martin Jay, the journalist who's known Nigel all the way back from 2002, I think it was. And you've obviously been a key figure in the Brexit Party, serving as an MEP, later becoming co-deputy leader of Reform UK in 2023. What initially drew you to work with Nigel Farage, and what were your hopes for the party's role in British politics at that time?
Yeah, so just to before I answer that, can I just say to the extent that I'm an ally of Nigel Farage's or ever was an ally of Nigel Farage's, it was born out of a desire to save the United Kingdom, to deliver us out of the EU, and now to uh, see off the existential threat that I think that our country is facing. Um, and if Nigel, as would now appear, in my view, unequivocally to be the case, is incapable of delivering for the United Kingdom, then he's no ally of mine. Just to get that clear, this is not personal. This is not because Nigel may have a wandering eye or a self-interest or is a narcissist or whatever, all those other things that people say about Nigel. For me, he could be all those things. If I had confidence that he could do the job,
Right.
I'd work with him. But I do not have confidence that he can do it. I think that he provides actually a distraction for those of us who wish to do it, and he absorbs valuable political energy, which should be dedicated to the job at hand, as opposed to, bigging up a man that, frankly, I think is going to fail us all.
Yeah. Now, during your time as an MEP and in those early days of Reform UK, what was your working relationship with Nigel like? And did you see eye to eye on the party's direction, particularly regarding Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol?
So the Northern Ireland Protocol wasn't a thing when I first started working with Nigel. Um, you know, that was we first met in March 2019 when Theresa May was failing to get Brexit over the line. You might recall March 29th, 2019 was the second deadline that we had to. It was the first deadline, sorry, it was the first deadline, the end of the 2-year period for Article 50 to get us out of the EU, and she failed to do it. But my time with Nigel, and as I said, I don't really want to focus too much on the man and the personality. I'd rather focus on why he is incapable of delivering the UK to the safe position. But my experience of him, since you've asked the question, is of a remote leader, a leader who didn't meet his troops much, let alone communicate. We used to have the odd meeting in the European Parliament. He'd come in, he'd talk to us, and then he'd leave. But we never had strategy meetings where, we discussed kinds of policies that the Brexit Party should have. We never discussed, for example, the crucial decision that he made unilaterally to stand down 317 candidates against the Conservative Party. That was done entirely by Nigel. And I learned about it, like every other Brexit Party MEP, by watching the television. And which is also, by the way, how I learnt about him coming back as leader last year. Even though I was deputy leader of the party, I had no forewarning, let alone discussion with him about the prospect of him coming back. And I learned about it at the press conference in which he announced himself as leader and set Richard Tice aside. And I mean, in a sense, we're beginning to reveal the man just in those two anecdotal bits of evidence. a man who is removed, a man who doesn't consult, a man who doesn't work with a team. He just makes these massive decisions on his own.
Yeah, we mentioned character. I know you're very keen on the policy side, but character is important. And as they say, he's seen as this charismatic, straight-talking leader. He resonates with millions. Having worked closely with him, do you think this public image aligns with the man you knew behind the scenes?
No, so what became apparent to me between him standing down 317 candidates and him reappointing himself leader of Reform, or indeed before I joined Reform, by March 2023, it had become clear to me that he was a problem. And the reason that had become clear to me was the following. The reasons are the following. I could understand the argument that we should stand down 317 candidates for fear of a Jeremy Corbyn government. We had to get Boris Johnson in. Um, because if we got Jeremy Corbyn, there would have been a second referendum. Brexit may have been reversed. But we all knew, including Nigel, who was on the record repeatedly in 2019 saying the withdrawal agreement was a wretched agreement. Northern Ireland Protocol, the political declaration made an intent of hitching the United Kingdom to the EU's apron strings. And we knew it was a bad agreement. And so the first real heads up I got about how weak Nigel was after we'd left technically the EU on 31st Jan 2020. And instead of staying on the battlefield during 2020, which was a crucial year for the UK because Boris Johnson was negotiating the trade agreement with the EU that subsequently came into force in January 2021, that was a crucial trade agreement because it gave us the opportunity to unpick some of the bad things in the withdrawal agreement. And instead of staying on the battlefield, Nigel said, Brexit's done, and he disappeared. He disappeared into the long grass. And Rupert Lowe and the late Robert Rowlands, sadly, the late Robert Rowlands, and I took Nigel out for dinner in August 2020. And we beseeched him, very expensive dinner, by the way, courtesy of me.
Where was it?
We It was at the Arts Club,
Oh, very nice. Yes.
with top wine and cigars and everything. I did everything to cajole him back into the political arena. And we three of us made it clear to him, we need you to fight for Brexit, Nigel, because it ain't done. And he turned round to me at supper, and Rupert will testify to this, I'm sure. And he said, well, it's all right for you, Ben. You were born with a silver spoon rammed up your backside, or words to that effect, which is entirely irrelevant. What's relevant here is that we do what's right for the country. But it became pretty clear to me at that point, this man is not for the end goal of securing a bright, prosperous, independent United Kingdom. He's a political expedient. He's a man who's in it for himself. He said to me at supper, he said to me at that same supper, I've done this for 20 years. I want to go and make money. And that's fair enough, Andrew. If you want to go and make money, go and make money. I think he should have stayed on the political battlefield, but he showed real weakness. And if he is intent on making money, then for God's sake, make it easier for those of us who wish to fight the fight, to fight the fight. By him saying Brexit was done, I'm laboring the point, forgive me. But by him saying Brexit was done, he made it even more difficult for people like me who wanted to fight for the country to say it's not done. Mr. Brexit says it's done. Ben Habib, who's a relative no one, says it's not done. So who do you believe? And when I fought against the Northern Ireland Protocol, which, as you know, and viewers will now know, I hope, is not just about Northern Ireland, it's about undermining Brexit. It's about having a EU grappling hook into the flesh of the United Kingdom. When I fought that battle, Nigel was no support at all. He didn't come out on GB News and say, good on Ben, fantastic, he's fighting this. Everyone support him. He made no efforts to support my crowdfunding exercise. He even said to me on the phone, he said, you're wasting your time. You go to the Supreme Court, you lose. Actually, it was a battle really worth fighting because the Supreme Court confirmed that the withdrawal agreement had broken the Acts of Union, which created the country. And to have that confirmed by the Supreme Court in itself was a really important step. But Nigel then went further and he said things like a united Ireland are inevitable. A united Ireland is inevitable. Now, for me, that's an abominable declaration from a British citizen. if you say a united Ireland is inevitable, you're basically saying you're prepared to give up on part of the United Kingdom. And the United Kingdom is only called the United Kingdom because it's the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Over 1 million British citizens in Northern Ireland. If you don't get behind the union, you're not behind the country. And if you're not behind the country, you don't actually understand what it means to leave the EU because it's the entire country that has to leave. Are you with me?
Yeah,
And
no,
so I could
absolutely.
see, yeah, so I could see Nigel was fundamentally, philosophically, politically, philosophically flawed. And Brexit wasn't done, and he says it's done. Big, big error and wrong, Nigel. And he says a united Ireland is inevitable, which absolutely reveals where he is on a significantly critical issue. And when Richard Tice invited me to join Reform, I declined. Actually, I wrote him an email. I spoke to Nigel Farage. And after my discussion with Nigel Farage, I wrote to Richard Tice and said, I'm not joining Reform. Nigel refuses to give up his shares. There's no democratization in the party. He thinks Brexit's done, and I don't think it's done. And you may see that as semantics. I see that as fundamentally important. He's prepared to back the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, even if they do the dirty on Northern Ireland. And I'm not. For me, I'm an ideologue. And I end my email to Richard Tice saying, fundamentally, Richard, I'm an ideologue and Nigel isn't. And what we need to save the country is a bunch of ideologues. We need people who are going to stand their ground and not budge. Nigel is a political expedient. He's a great political tactician. He can smell most of the time, though I think he's got it fundamentally wrong with Rupert. He can smell the changing airs of politics and he can react to them. But the time for political expediency, the time to be that clever political dancer, appealing to all sorts in order to propel yourself into power. The time for that is gone. The country doesn't have the luxury of that time anymore. The country is absolutely on the precipice, and we need to yank it back to safety. So it's not going to happen under Nigel Farage, who more recently is on the record saying he's not worried about the rate of demographic change. He's not in favor of mass deportations of illegal migrants. Well, if you're not prepared to deport those who are here criminally, then what the hell are you in office to do? And he said, nebulous things like we mustn't politically alienate Islam. I don't even know what that means. You know, what are you saying, Nigel? Are you saying that somehow we've got to hand over, we've got to allow the United Kingdom to become the Islamic Republic of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Is that what you're, the Islamic Republic of Great Britain? Is that what you mean, Nigel? Well, I stand against that. We're a Christian country. Any half-sane individual would stand against that. And then he's done idiotic things like putting Charlie Mullins forward as a candidate. On the day that Charlie Mullins was put forward as a candidate, he reavowed his pledge to want to join the EU.
Yeah,
And if
absolutely.
you,
And you and I have spoken about that beforehand. I mean, Charlie broke
yeah,
that story on the Andrew Eborn show, and he sort of said he'd been asked by Nigel to stand, and he'd agreed. But Charlie famously was absolutely pro EU, wasn't he?
absolutely. And then you've got Nick Candy, the treasurer of Reform UK. On the day when he joined Reform UK, he said Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson are friends of mine, and they're great minds. Tony Blair is the architect of the disaster that we now face as a country. Granted, there were lots of prime ministers who added to the problems, just about every single prime minister since then. But you cannot hold Tony Blair in high esteem and have a sensible, in my view, sensible political outlook. Anyone who thinks Tony Blair is a good guy has no room. There should be no room for them in Reform UK. And if Nigel doesn't get that, if he thinks, oh, Ben, we've got to pivot to the centre ground, we've got to win the popular vote. When we've got there, then promise, trust me, I'll do all the right things. No, I don't believe you, Nigel. You've said too many things that don't make sense. You've done too many things that are wrong. So even if Nigel was against democratizing his party, I might even still be able to get my head around supporting him if he was absolutely solid on all the issues. But he's as flaky as a Cadbury flake that's flaked all over your floor. That's where Nigel is. Just a bunch of flakes everywhere. And you can't trust this man. And what he did to Rupert is what he's done to dozens and dozens of people, as you've now revealed in a number of your shows. And fundamentally, he's an untrustworthy individual. It's not only sufficient for him it's not sufficient for him just to part company with people he doesn't like or from whom he wishes to distance himself. He has to rubbish them on the way out. He has to try and destroy them. These trumped up charges against Rupert Lowe, again, that's abominable. Why do that to a good man, a man who stood for this country? You may disagree with him. You may not like him. That's academic. You don't trump up police charges against him. Absolutely wrong. This Nigel is not the man to save this country.
Yeah. I mean, you've also, I mean, you criticise Nigel, as you say, for running reform like a fiefdom. You cite his complete control through share ownership and lack of democratization. Can you describe other specific instances where you saw this control stifling the party's potential and how it affected your role as co-deputy leader?
Well, I mean, I knew actually, Andrew, the minute he came back as leader, and just to say, reiterate, I had no forewarning, no discussion that he was going to undemocratically foist himself on the party. I was going through that, it was the middle of the general election. He'd already said that the US election was more important than the UK election. He'd already said 6 weeks wasn't enough to make an impact. What changed his mind, by the way, I'm digressing, but what changed his mind was looking at a poll that Aaron Banks had done for Clacton, which showed that he could win Clacton. And that's when Nigel decided to come back. We didn't get the 5 MPs in that general election because Nigel came back. We were going to get MPs anyway. And one of those MPs, James McMurdoch, was just a paper candidate, just to prove the point. We were going to get MPs. And Nigel claims that, he put the party on the map. If he hadn't come back, we wouldn't have MPs. So there's an example of the dictatorial manner in which he acts. He appointed himself leader when he thought he could win. He didn't once speak to me during the general election. I haven't spoken to Nigel once since he came back as leader. I knew the minute he came back that we were done, that I was done with him. And I wanted to resign, actually, Andrew. I wanted to resign the next day. And you may have heard me say this before. And I spoke to my inner team, including Baroness Hoey, Kate Hoey. And Kate said, for goodness sake, don't resign in the middle of a general election. You will not be forgiven for that. And also, I had obligations to the traditional unionist voice of Northern Ireland, because we had an alliance with them and I was financing their general election. I was a significant contributor to their general election finances. So I didn't want to undermine the TUV in what they were doing. You might also recall, by the way, that Nigel, during the middle of the general election, against our alliance, endorsed candidates who were standing against the TUV. That's the measure of the man. He had no moral or other seeming obligation to his own allies. He just made a unilateral decision, and I learned about it on the BBC that he's endorsing Sammy Wilson and Ian Paisley in the middle of a general election. I was the deputy leader. He didn't pick up the phone to me and say, Ben, I know you fought for Northern Ireland. I know you fought the protocol. I know we have an alliance with the TUV. Do you mind if I endorse these two individuals? He just went ahead and endorsed them. And then there was a massive rearguard action to try and distance ourselves from his endorsement. But the reality is his endorsement really reveals him. He didn't care about the fight for Northern Ireland. He wanted his two mates, Sammy Wilson and Ian Paisley, to do well. So there's another example. And then he talked about the democratization of the party as we came out of the general election. He did it purely to me, because I'd been making lots of noises behind the scenes saying, we got to democratize, we got to democratize. And he thought, I think, that if I come out and say we're democratizing, that'll do away with all Ben Habib's nonsense and we'll be able to kick him into the long grass. But he underestimates me. I look at detail, I read documents. So I was seeing what the hell it was that they were doing, and they haven't democratized. Zayar Yousaf, I'm saying this now, if Nigel watches this, Nigel, you and Zayar Yousaf are lying about the democratization of the party. You've changed the structure. You've tried to give the illusion that it's democratized, but you haven't. And that's the other thing, Andrew. He's lying. Do we want a liar as leader? We don't. He should have just said, it would have been a much better response to say, Ben, you want democratization. I think otherwise. I'm not going to democratize for this reason. That would have been a more honest approach. I may have had some debate with him over it, but he's not that kind of person. So that's really it. He's just not fit for office. And What he's done to Rupert, he's done to dozens and dozens and dozens of grassroots members.
Yeah.
Zia and him have actually systematically gone about destroying the movement that Richard Tice and I created. That's the only way I can describe it. They've
Yeah.
set aside all the people who put the party on the map.
Well, let's talk about that because in July 2024, he replaced you and David Bull, with Richard
Yeah.
Tice as deputy leader after the general election. He later said you became bitter and twisted and called your departure a champagne moment. As you famously told me last time, he was singing, The Sun Has Put His Hat On. What's your side of the story? And why do you think he removed you? And how did that moment impact your view of him?
I'm a problem for him because I am an ideologue and I won't budge on my principles. That's why Rupert's a problem for him. That's why so many in the grassroots movement who gave up their Saturdays, Sundays, free time, sometimes some gave up their jobs to fight for Reform UK. They're all a problem for him because they're ideologues. They have a certain vision of how they want the country to be saved, and Nigel's not with them. Nigel is a political expedient. He doesn't want ideologues. He wants people who can wave this way and that way so that he can pivot to the center ground in the pursuit of power. And that's why he got rid of me. I'm not bitter or twisted. I am very exercised. I am absolutely exercised by the need to save this country. And, I hold my head in my hands when I look at the political state in which we're in, the political, economic, constitutional, cultural state we're in. But that doesn't mean I'm bitter and twisted. It just means I'm triggered. And do not confuse the two.
Yeah, I mean, you left Reform UK, November 2024. You cited being banned and silenced by Party HQ as the final straw, is what you called it. Can you walk us
Yeah.
through what happened and were there specific actions by Nigel that made you feel you had no choice but to leave?
Well, that was the last straw. I mean, I'd seen the Winston Marshall interview in which he said that, he didn't want to politically alienate Islam. I'd seen the interview with Steve Edgington that he did, where he said he didn't really worry about the rate of demographic change. He wasn't in favor of the mass deportation of illegal migrants. My antenna were up. My antenna were up anyway because he thought a united Ireland was inevitable, which is an abomination to me. So my antenna were up anyway with him. But then after the general election, by the way, even after I'd been removed as deputy leader, I went around the country advocating for reform, speaking to grassroots, saying, stick with reform, stay with it, keep the pressure on the leadership to do the right things, but stick with reform. And then slowly I started getting wind from various people with whom I'm very close to the grassroots, by the way, very close to them. And I started getting messages saying, we're banned from seeing you. We've got you booked in, but we're banned from seeing you. You're not allowed to speak to us. And I thought, whoa, what the hell? And, then someone sent me a text message, a photograph of a text message that they'd had with Richard Tice, where Richard Tice had confirmed that I was banned from speaking. And at that point, there's no future, right? I mean, at that point, what can you do? You have to exit. You have to sever your ties. And I wanted nothing to do with reform at that point because beyond, apart from anything else, I didn't want to be sullied, with something that was going to fail the country. And that's how I see it. And I'm not delighted at all by what's happened to Rupert. I'm not delighted at all, but it is a very important thing that's been revealed as a result of the bust up with Rupert. And it's these things that we've been discussing. It's the fact that Nigel isn't the man, that reform isn't the hope that we had of it, that it's incapable of doing what it needs to do. And that's a necessary component of now being able to do what is right for the country. If I'd been silenced and didn't have an opportunity to speak about what needs to be done, we'd be in real trouble as a country. What Rupert has done, which is so brilliant, is show all of this to the world. And now we can plan properly to save the country without a distraction like Nigel Farage or Zia Yusuf, his sidekick.
Yeah, and some very interesting point. I want to talk as well because we criticise that the structure of Reform UK, and I had Catherine Blakelock talking about how she set up the company because it was cheaper to set up a company; it only cost a few quid. You've called for Reform UK to democratise, criticising the structure as a company controlled by Nigel and Richard Tice. He's argued this setup prevents hostile takeovers, but you said it's untenable for a party aiming to govern. How do you think this lack of democracy has limited UK Reform UK's growth, and what changes would you have pushed for if you stayed?
So for democratization, read proper processes, checks and balances, and ability to ensure that members, and particularly senior members of the party, can air their views, have an open discussion, that the leadership is obliged to listen to what they have to say, and that through a process of debate at the senior levels as well as junior levels and feeding up policies and so on, policies are established and draft legislation and governance and leadership and everything. It's not about just the ability of the so-called members to remove the leader. It's about much more. It's about creating a party that's capable of attracting top people and then putting them into government and delivering. And and that's what I meant by democratization. I completely reject the notion that by democratizing you give rise to entryism. If you do a really stupid structure, yes, you can achieve that end. You can fail in your attempt to democratize by allowing a whole load of Corbynites to become members of Reform UK and then hijack it. But there are easy ways to prevent that from happening. You can have a series, you can have a sort of series of electoral bodies. So you have the membership at the bottom, if you like, and then they elect a core sort of central heavyweight intellectual speaking thinking body of a college, if you like, of the great minds of our movement, and they in turn elect the leadership, and the leadership is held to account by them. And so there's no ability for a rampant change in the membership to hijack the leadership. Are you with me? There are lots of ways you can do this to prevent entryism, which is what Nigel says is the problem. But fundamentally, Nigel doesn't believe in democracy. And this is the other thing. You know, he bangs the drum for the democracy of the United Kingdom, but he's unable to adhere to democracy himself. He holds people in contempt. He doesn't know the grassroots of reform. Hasn't been out to talk to the grassroots. He loves to turn up in a stadium with a whole load of fireworks, loud music, razzmatazz, turn up on a stage, bang out a populist speech, which is all fine, all great, because you get people revved up, and then disappear. I've actually gone out, met these people, had coffee with them, chatted to them, campaigned with them, gone to their constituencies to campaign on their behalf, had them to my constituency to campaign on my behalf, absolutely got to know them. And it's fundamental that a leader does that. And but if you don't believe in democracy, if you don't believe in the people, if you don't hold the people in anything other than contempt, you won't do it. And then this comes back to a bigger point, Andrew, doesn't it? If you hold your own members in contempt, how do you hold the electorate, many of whom will disagree with you? And then there's the other dimension of democracy. Democracy only means something if you can define the unit through which you're delivering that democracy. The unit is the United Kingdom. He can't define the United Kingdom because he doesn't think about Northern Ireland. So he's fundamentally flawed at many levels.
Yeah, no, interesting stuff, and you've been very eloquent about that on a number of our conversations. Now, in August 2024, you wrote that Farage didn't cause the riots following the Southport stabbings, but could help settle them by addressing root causes like immigration integration. Do you think he's done enough since to tackle these issues, or has he leaned too much on the provocative rhetoric, as some critics claim?
I think he's been absolutely bloody useless on the riots. He has said repeatedly that he knew of things that had been kept secret by the Starmer administration, which, if revealed, would be the scandal of our age, or words to that effect. Do you
Yeah,
remember that, Andrew?
yeah, absolutely.
So, where is he? Why isn't he saying that? Why did he not use his parliamentary privilege to get up in Parliament and not compromise the Axel Ruda case that was being, which was going through the courts at the time? There was no need to do that, but he had absolutely the right and the ability to call out Keir Starmer for brandishing all those who were protesting as far right, to call out Merseyside police for not getting ahead of the problem, to call out Yvette Cooper on the same issues, to call all three of them out for holding the identity of Axel Ruda secret, describing him colloquially as a Welshman, therefore cloaking his true identity. When we think of a Welshman, we think of someone out standing in his field with a bunch of sheep. We don't think of a frizzy haired, second generation, radicalized Rwandan. And that's what we had. The killer was second generation Rwandan. And we've got to be clear about his ethnic origin because it is relevant to the killings in Southport. And Nigel is silent now. Nigel didn't talk at all, hasn't spoken once about Peter Lynch, A man, a grandfather who was arrested for what he said, not what he did. The charges were against him were that he committed violence, but all the evidence put forward against Peter Lynch was about what he said and what he had on his placard, not what he did. He was incarcerated for 2 years and 8 months, and he died. He hanged himself in prison a month later. That is a scandal, isn't it, Andrew?
Oh,
That
totally a scandal, absolutely.
uh,
But
and
why
where's
do you? I
Nigel
mean,
on it?
it's
Where's
a
Nigel on it?
fairly obvious point, isn't it? But why do you think Nigel's doing it? Is his only focus to get elected and to be prime minister, whatever the cost? He can get rid of all the policies. All he cares about power. Is that what you're saying?
That is precisely what I'm saying, and that is why he is precisely a very dangerous man.
And in terms of the spat, let me put it that way, with Rupert Lowe and Nigel, where do you see that going now?
Well, I think Nigel has made a fundamental mistake at multiple levels. Politically, he's made a mistake because Rupert is popular, contrary to what Nigel and his Faragista followers would like to say. Rupert is very popular with reform voters, and he's known across the country. And people like Aaron Banks say, well, Twitter's not the real world. Well, let me tell you something, Aaron Banks. Most of Reform UK's grassroots and supporters are on Twitter, on X. They know exactly who Rupert is, and they know exactly what's happened. And so it's politically, it's disaster for him. You look at the number of likes and things Nigel's getting on his tweets, they pale in significance by comparison, in a pale in numbers compared to Rupert Lowe. So politically, I think it's a disaster. Ideologically, it's a disaster. Rupert was saying the right things. I know that it's uncomfortable to talk about mass deportations because it's a very robust policy. It's a policy that people will be uncomfortable delivering because it means upheaval. But these people that are in this country that need to be deported are here illegally. And if we're not prepared to deport them, the message we're sending out to the rest of the world is come to the United Kingdom. We are incapable of defending our borders. How can someone who bangs the drum of sovereignty not understand that we have to deport every single illegal migrant?
Yeah.
They go hand in hand.
Oh no,
And
you're
Rupert
absolutely
was
right. And you look at how Trump's done it. No exceptions. This is it. It's an absolute take away the incentive to come here. And the other big dividing thing is the attitude to Tommy Robinson, who's got very vocal supporters. Where do you stand on Tommy?
Look, I don't know Tommy Robinson. People, so the BBC want people like me to say, I love Tommy Robinson, so that they can say, look at Ben Habib, he's a far right, nutcase. He loves Tommy Robinson. And other people want to ask me about Tommy Robinson because they're fearful that I might do what Nigel Farage does, which is continually throw Tommy Robinson under a bus. That's what Nigel does. Every time he's asked about Tommy Robinson, he says, well, he's a far right nutcase, and I've done more to rid this country of the far right, and blah, blah, blah. And he absolutely lays into Tommy Robinson. I don't know Tommy Robinson. All I can say is that Tommy Robinson has been targeted by the government. He is a political prisoner, without shadow of a doubt. And I can say that absolutely, as I say, without a shadow of a doubt, because it was the Attorney General of this country, a political appointment, who interceded in a civil case and decided to throw the book at Tommy Robinson. So when Nigel gets up and says, oh, I'm going to explain to Elon Musk why Tommy Robinson deserves to be in jail, Nigel doesn't know the facts. Or if he knows the facts, he's ignoring them.
Yeah, and
It
I
was
think
a political move.
whatever people think, and contempt of court and interrupting a rape trial and all those sort of stuff, there's some sort of punishment in order to make the legal system maintain its trust. But putting somebody in solitary confinement for what's effectively 18 months, it sounds like torture, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I read, I don't know if you did, I read the judgment, I think 2 days ago,
Yeah.
a few days ago from the High Court, where his appeal was rejected. He made an application to
Yes.
be let out of solitary. And Shabana Mahmood, who is the Secretary of State, the case was obviously, against Shabana Mahmood to have him released. She came out and fought the case against releasing him from. So she's another political appointment. The Secretary of State's a political appointment. Why do they wish to keep this man in solitary confinement? And the reasons given, some of the reasons given in the judgment, are that his life would be threatened because there are Muslims in the jail. So you remove someone's civil rights because they may be threatened.
Yeah.
surely it's those who are threatening him that need to be put into solitary confinement, not the individual who's threatened. It's a bit like that Jewish gentleman who was told by the police when he was near the Palestinian marches
Yes.
that unless he removed himself, he would be arrested. He was a law-abiding British citizen on the streets of London. How dare you threaten him with arrest because you fear he may be attacked? And it's the same argument made in the Tommy Robinson case.
Yeah. It's
It's a
interesting, as you know, Elon's father, Errol Musk, is on my show all of the time. He thinks that Tommy is the new Nelson Mandela, or may be prime minister one day. Do you see that?
it's not about, so I want to get away from the politics of individuals. This is where it's all gone wrong with Nigel. His persona is so big.
Yeah.
Tommy Robinson's persona with a group of people in this country is massive. It's not about Tommy Robinson. It's not about Tommy Robinson. It's not about Nigel. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about the United Kingdom and its people. And the fact that Tommy Robinson is in jail as a political prisoner, that should worry all of us, whether
Yes.
you're left, right, whatever. That should worry all of us.
No, you're absolutely right. Ben Habib, it's been an absolute pleasure. We will get you back. There's so much more to unpack, including the new UK pack that you have launched. I do want to dig into that. But for now, Ben Habib, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Andrew.